Ever eaten your dinner in a thunderstorm because it was safer than telling the truth? Ever watched your own blood mix with rain while someone calmly called you a liar? Here's how a plastic lunchbox, a broken heirloom, and a tiny camera cracked open a billionaire's house. And my life. My name is Maya Williams, single mom cleaner by trade, stubborn by necessity. That night the rain came in sideways, cold enough to sting, loud enough to make your thoughts duck for cover. I sat under the oak by the service path with a cheap blue lunchbox on my lap. Uniform, soaked hair stuck to my cheeks, spooning soggy rice and beans, like it was a job I could still get right. My palm burned from where gravel chewed it, but I kept eating because if I stopped, I might cry, and if I cried, I wasn't sure I'd find the brakes. You know what I mean? Then a car door slammed like a verdict. Lucas Harding crossed the courtyard with that fast, expensive walk men learn when the world mostly says yes to them. "Maya, what are you doing out here? You're drenched," he snapped, breath steaming in the cold. Before I could answer, the housekeeper. Eleanor slid up beside him under a perfect umbrella voice, smooth and measured. "She shouldn't be here, sir. She broke your grandmother's crystal vase this afternoon." No, I thought not this. The vase had lived on a pedestal longer than some of us had been alive, catching sunlight like it owned the day. Eleanor's elbow had clipped it. I'd seen the wobble, heard the shatter, watched her face go still as glass. In the silence that followed, she leaned close and whispered that if I wanted to keep my job, I'd take the blame, and when I couldn't force the words out, she told me to go wait outside until she decided what to tell him. So I waited. In the rain. In a uniform that held every hour I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. "Did you break it?" Lucas asked, jaw tight, rain sliding from his hair. "I didn't, sir," I said, voice smaller than I liked. "I was cleaning the cabinet and Eleanor." Enough, he barked the word sharper than the wind. I startled, heel-slipped, hand hit stone, skin tore open. The lunchbox tumbled, rice and beans skidding through rainwater like a cheap painting of humiliation. I didn't cry. Some of us learn early that tears are a luxury. I looked up and said the only thing I had left, "Please believe me." He didn't. Not then. He told us we'd discuss it in the morning to clean up to end the night. Eleanor squeezed the umbrella handle like she'd pressed a button that worked every time. I pressed my palm to my apron to slow the bleeding and swallowed the taste of iron and rain. Pattern interrupt. Ready. The gardener knocked. An hour later, while the fire in the study tried to make the room feel honest, Henry stood at the door, soaked to the cap, a small USB wrapped in plastic in his rough hand. "Sir, I think you should see this before you decide about Miss Williams," he said, voice low, like he was speaking to the walls, too. "Henry isn't the type to stir a pot. He plants things and waits for roots. But the East Corridor cameras had been glitching, and he'd set up a backup. That little lens saw what power tried to hide. Lucas plugged it in. Grainy but clear. Eleanor's sleeve brushed the pedestal, the wobble, the fall, the explosion of glass across marble like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Then me, confused, stepping into the frame, Eleanor's finger in my face, the push toward the service door, the point to the garden like I was a rug to be shaken out. No sound, but you could hear it anyway if you've ever been talked over. The timestamp read 5:47 p.m. It was past 7. I'd been outside the whole time. He came back into the rain with an umbrella and eyes that looked different, not softer exactly, but awake to something that had been sleeping too long. "Maya," he said, "you're hurt." I looked down at my hand. "It's nothing." "I watched the footage," he said, voice steady, almost quiet. "I saw everything." He set his coat over my shoulders. Too big, too warm, exactly right. "Come inside." 2 words changed a house. "You're fired." He said them to Eleanor after pressing the space bar, and freezing the frame with her finger inches from my face. She didn't deny, didn't grovel, just tilted her head and said, "Girls like her know how to play quiet." Lucas didn't look at me when he answered, he looked at her. "Get out." And she did. Back in the kitchen under soft pendant lights, he cleaned my hand himself, moving slow like speed would break something else. "You have a son," he said, not asking. "Joshua," I said, ready to guard his name. "How do you know Henry saw the drawings in your apartment?" he said, tying off the bandage like a promise. "Let's make sure he gets what he needs." "Yeah, that happened. If it were you, what would you have done with a man who yelled at you an hour ago, now apologizing and wrapping your hand like you were made of glass? Forgive, refuse, freeze." I sat still and let him be gentle, because anger snaps fast, but remorse takes time, and both are chapters in the same book. Morning changed the air, not the chores. The house felt lighter, the kind of lighter that comes when a locked window finally cracks open. Lucas asked me to help fix what fear had managed for years. Not a shiny title, not at first. Just inventory that matched delivery schedules that didn't punish the kindest people, a bulletin board where questions could live without becoming sins. We stopped accusing and started asking. Lucas drifted into the service wing with hands in pockets, no clipboard, eyes open. He said a thing I wrote down like a new language for old places: generosity isn't charity, it's responsibility. Then the outside knocked all smiles and knives. Donors toured the estate, the type who have smile lines from cameras, not laughter. "Is she the help or the help's manager?" one woman asked within earshot, like my ears were part of the furniture. A week later, a registered letter arrived from a partner foundation, cool and polite. The way ice looks pretty until your fingers go numb. That afternoon, a front-page article landed about the rapid rise of a former maid and concerns over stewardship. They used a picture of me leaving the gate months back, hair messy, angle unkind, because tired looks guilty on women like me. Do you think that's fair to make a story out of someone's exhaustion and call it evidence? Drop me a comment if a headline ever turned you into a point instead of a person. Lucas called me to the study. "They want a story," he said, "so let's give them the truth." He asked me to stand beside him at the press conference, not behind. Then he did something I wasn't ready for. He offered me co-chair for internal affairs and the foundation work. "Not for optics," he said, "for the work." I hesitated because my life had trained me to be excellent at gratitude and terrible at taking a seat. Then I thought about Joshua and ceilings, and I said yes. "Stick around because what happened next will blow your mind." We unlocked a drawer in Eleanor's old quarters and found an envelope that should have changed everything years ago. Lucas's mother's original will. The version everyone knew had shaved off a section completely. The original created a staff trust fund with names scribbled in the margins: Henry, Rosa, Janet, money, set aside for education, medical care, retirement, for anyone who gave 5 years to that house. Eleanor had suppressed it, filed a revised will to the board, called it efficiency. We took it to the boardroom on the 34th floor skyline, shining like reputation. "Reinstate the trust retroactively," Lucas said, and we say out loud that this house forgot who kept it standing. The chair warned us about legacy donors, about precedent, about the optics of me. Lucas set his pen down and said a quiet sentence that made the air heavy. "If this board votes against decency, I will dissolve Harding Global and start over with the truth." Your choice. Silence. Paper shuffles. Votes. 7 in favor, 4 opposed, 2 too nervous to pick a side. Motion passed. We exhaled for about 5 minutes. Here's the twist. A federal agent called me in. Someone had handed over a private ledger off the books: payouts, shell donations to ghost projects, lines that turned charity into a siphon. And there, in neat blue ink, a punch to the throat, March 12th, 2017. $40,000. Staff settlement. Maya W. Note. Silence clause signed. I felt the room tilt. I have never taken that money, never signed that clause, never even seen that sheet. It was a lie planted years ago, like a tripwire waiting for the day I stood up so they could say, "Sit down." Weaponized paperwork. If it were you, would you scream, "Go to war, walk away"? What would you have done? I picked up a key I'd found hidden behind a bookshelf months back, because lies don't float alone. Someone holds them up and writes them down. Behind a false panel, we found journals Eleanor's bound in leather, decades of control in tidy handwriting. The entries were cold, precise, sometimes cruel, and in the margins the 3 a.m. notes of a woman who knew her ice would crack. Maya watches everything. Steel in her silences. The kind you can't own, only delay. She hadn't feared my skin or my paycheck, not really. She feared being forgotten by a house that didn't need her to be cruel to be clean. That night, I asked the staff to meet me under the oak, the same tree where I'd eaten in the rain. The wind had teeth, the fire pit was a circle of small courage. I held the ledger copy with my forged line and fed it to the flames. Not the journals, the truth matters. But the lie, I would not let that thing breathe our air. We keep the truth, I said, we tell it on our terms, slowly, clearly, as long as this house stands. Court came. Reporters lined the steps like gulls. Inside, the prosecutor laid out how funds meant for children and towns had been rerouted into nothing dressed up as something. Janet, who had ironed more sheets than most people sleep on, took the stand and said with a voice you could lean on, silence was my survival, and then it became my betrayal. She turned over letters that traced the money. The judge ordered restitution from the Harding Trust Control to an independent ethics board and granted me full exoneration and whistleblower protection. The gavel cracked, not like an ending, like a door. After I didn't want interviews, I wanted work. We converted the East Wing into something the house had never seen. Not a showpiece, a sanctuary. Rooms that didn't echo with rules, lamps that didn't glare, shelves with books instead of old certificates. The first child who arrived, a boy named Daniel with curls and a dinosaur shirt, slipped out of a nap and found me in the hall. He held up a drawing of 2 stick figures under a loud yellow sun and whispered, "They said you fixed the house." I told him the truth. "Maybe you will." We built a wall of portraits and called it Honor without asking permission. Simple black and white photos, no flattery, no paint. Henry's quote underneath his smile. Every seed I planted here grew bigger than I expected. Carla's. I stayed to make noise, not to be quiet. Mine went up last because I kept refusing. The staff kept insisting. And in the end, the line beneath my photo says, "Power isn't what you inherit. It's what you survive and share." Not everyone clapped. A foundation sent a letter full of polite panic about optics. Anonymous notes arrived using the word tradition like a leash. We wrote back, "Transparency is not a scandal. Progress isn't corruption. Sharing power doesn't make it smaller. It multiplies it." Then we ate peach cobbler in the kitchen. Henry spilled his water, laughing at a joke I can't repeat on camera, and for a minute the house sounded like a place that might deserve its own second chance. There was one more room to open. Lucas unlocked a door at the end of a quiet hall, dust lifting in the light, like slow music. "My mother's space," he said, eyes doing that shiny thing we call allergies, when the truth is we're human. "I want it to be a wellness room for the staff, real chairs, soft light help without begging." He paused. I didn't look at what this house did to people, I'm looking now. He's not a hero. He's a man learning to listen. That might be rarer. A board member who didn't vote for me stopped me near the elevator and said I was wrong. I told her the only apology I trust is a next right thing. She nodded, and the next meeting she voted for a scholarship program for staff kids. We put the forms on paper in fonts big enough to read without squinting and without shame. Rosa cried at her desk quietly, then got up and made bread for everyone, like Grace had calories. Will this last, you ask? Can a house built on silence learn to sing? Will wealth switch sides for good? I don't know. Power doesn't like to move and money likes to keep quiet. But I know what it felt like to eat alone in the rain, holding plastic like a shield. And I know what it feels like now, to stand under the same oak and hear children chasing each other, shoes slapping the path like a promise. The tree didn't change. We did. Here's where I leave you with a knot and a match. I burned a ledger page that had my forged signature on it. Some people say that was wrong. Evidence should live no matter how ugly that fire is, a kind of forgetting. Others say the real evidence stayed, the journals, the emails, the court records, and that burning a lie is how you keep it from staining the next kid's folder. Which side are you on? Do you think that was justice or a mistake? And tell me, should legacy be protected if it was built on keeping the people who held it up invisible? Or does love of tradition become cruelty when it refuses to share the table? If you stayed with me this far, thank you. If it were you, would you have taken the promotion or told the billionaire to clean his own house first? Would you have stood in that rain or kicked the door? What would you have done? Drop your city and local time in the comments. So I know where this story traveled today. If you've ever been blamed for something you didn't do, tell us how you survived and who finally believed you. If you believe workers deserve dignity and truth should beat optics, tap like share this with one person who needs to hear it and subscribe so these stories find the people who think they're alone. I'm Maya. I used to mop the floors here. Now I build rooms where voices don't need permission to be loud. If this made you angry, relieved, hopeful, even doubtful, say it out loud. That's how houses change. And that's how we make sure a lunch in the rain is never the safest option again.